What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing 3 of the brand new Shadow Pokemon added to the game in the current Team Rocket Takeover event, which by the way, you can remove frustration on all Shadow Pokemon right now, so make sure you take advantage of that. Now, I wouldn't really expect this trio to work that well together, as it's not like I spent ages carefully crafting the team and thinking about how to cover for various weaknesses and whatnot. I'm literally just showcasing 3 of the new Shadows on the same team, but I did actually start my sets with a really nice 9-1 run. I then quickly ruined a lot of that progress with an 0-5 where honestly I played so badly and I could not believe some of the things that I was doing, but that happens sometimes. I then brought it back with another couple of positive sets to have a pretty positive day overall. The only thing I will say is that the IVs specifically on the Beware are so atrocious because not only do they look this bad, also one more power up takes it to 1502 CP, so it is miles off of getting as maxed out as it possibly could be, and you really felt the difference with those bad IVs that it made in some of these battles. A lot of battles I lost purely because it went down way sooner than it should have done. However, I've done like 20 normal type grunts. I only saw 3 Stuffle in the lead. One of them actually gave me a Starly encounter, which was the second Pokemon, which really annoyed me. And surprisingly, this was still the best one I caught. But as a content creator, unfortunately, you kind of just have to suck it up and build whatever you got because the content is very much time dependent, and the longer you hold off, the less people are going to care. And that's why a lot of the IVs on the Pokemon that I showcase, you can see, aren't very good. It's not through choice. It's not like I'm looking for specific attack weighted breakpoints. I'm actually just trying to get the video out as soon as possible, so I build whatever I have. But anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. What has been your favorite Shadow Pokemon you've caught during the Team Rocket event so far? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Shadow Heliolisk into Florges. Now, unfortunately, Heliolisk has received many nerfs in recent seasons, not because it was particularly strong, but a lot of its moves were on very strong Pokemon that have needed to be kept in check. So it also has access to Mud Slap as a fast move, which of course got nerfed this season. Parabolic Charge now costs 50 energy rather than 45. Bulldoze got reworked, I guess not necessarily nerfed, actually probably slightly more playable now, but also it did have access to Breaking Swipe, which got a pretty substantial nerf. Used to be 35 energy, is now 50 energy, which means Bulldoze is actually its cheapest charge move and is the only reason why I'm running Bulldoze here. Bulldoze, of course, will allow it to reach it in just 3 Volt Switches, which if you don't run Bulldoze, you're going to take 4 Volt Switches to get to the next charge move, which is not really ideal for a Pokemon that is so glassy. So here we're going to go for the Bulldoze. It is, of course, super effective into Skeledirge. They're going to come back in with the Florges, but we can now outpace them to another Bulldoze. Bulldoze number 2 gets the KO. We swap into Beware, and the opponent's final Pokemon is going to be a Dunsparce. Now, I could have thrown a Superpower straight away. I wasn't entirely sure if that would get the one-shot, so I didn't want to debuff myself first, but we're going to see. Superpower easily gets the KO up against the Dunsparce, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. I see Togekiss in the lead, so this is a great lead matchup for me. The opponent's going to be safe swapping into a Shadow Ampharos, and so I'm going to go straight for a Bulldoze. Bulldoze is going to hit for super effective damage. The opponent going to use a shield there, and so I swap into my Shiinotic. I believe Shiinotic does actually completely wall everything they can throw outside of maybe Power Gem, but that's quite unlikely that they'll be running Power Gem, so we're just going to no shield here. But unfortunately, they can reach one more Brutal Swing before fully farming me down. Now, I'm going to, before I fully farm them down, but I will leave with a Moonblast, and as you're going to see, Moonblast does huge damage to the Togekiss. That puts them into range where 1 Volt Switch will KO. Their final Pokemon is a Shadow Quagsire, and now they do have an energy advantage. This is going to be slightly tricky for me, especially since my Beware has such bad IVs. Can I actually reach back-to-back superpowers here before the opponent fully Mudshots farm me down? So we're going to go for the second one, and we are just barely able to get there. That is pretty close from Beware, but Superpower, despite the fact that I just debuffed myself, does get the KO. The opponent realizing we've still got a shield, and so they just concede the match. So, GG's on there into the next battle. I'm going to see Fortress in the lead. So this is actually going to be a decent matchup for me. Of course, Sand Tomb is going to hit for super effective damage, and it will do quite a lot of damage into Shadow Heliolisk. So I'm going to shield this, but I'm not going to bother throwing any energy at all. Instead, I'm going to swap out into my Shiinotic. I'm able to catch the next Sand Tomb here. The opponent now going to come in with a Licky Licky, which of course is not a great matchup for me, as Astonish, non-stab, and double resisted. But we can fire off a Seed Bomb. The opponent now going to look to overfarm massively, before full sending a Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball gets the KO there. We can now come in with the Beware, and the opponent is going to fire off another charge move. The opponent actually on Shadow Ball and Earthquake. That does huge damage, but we can now go for a superpower. And remember, Heliolisk does have a ton of energy. We've already got a Bulldoze and a Parabolic Charge loaded. We actually farm up to 100 energy before throwing. Bulldoze grabs the shield, and at this point I might as well boost up my defense here, as the opponent, if they want to double shield, they will then drop my defense there with a Sand Tomb. But the opponent now going to be fully farmed down by the Volt Switches. They go for the Sand Tomb, but their final Pokemon is for Alligator, and of course we can just go and full send a Parabolic Charge. Parabolic Charge, super effective. It gets the KO. It boosts my defense, which doesn't really make a difference there, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up there into next battle. We're going to see a Macargo in the lead. The opponent's going to be safe swapping into a Shadow Kanto Marowak. So, I'm going to come in with Shinotic, and unfortunately, they will just barely outpace me to a Rock Slide, which does substantial damage there. And actually, since we're Shadow on Shadow, if the opponent really wants to, they can double shield and then fully commit to a full Mudslap farm down. And unfortunately, it looks like that's what they're going to go for here. So the opponent is going to double shield. However, I'm hoping Beware can come in, double shield as well, and then commit to a full low kick farm down. If we're able to get the farm down here, Beware's energy is pretty good into anything outside of fairy type Pokemon. So we're going to go for the double shield there. They fire off another Bone Club, but we don't quite get the farm down. They're already at yet another move, and Bone Club gets the KO there. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Flygon. We've got no play with Heliolisk, and so I just concede the match. Honestly, Kanto Marowak had me on toast in that battle, but into the next battle, we're going to see Ampharos in the lead, which is great for us because we've got access to Bulldoze. Bulldoze is going to be shielded by the opponent. I'm now going to look to shield in return as the opponent fires off a Trailblaze. Then I'm going to swap out here. I do swap out early just because in case the opponent did still want to throw a charge move, if I swapped out early there, we could then start getting ahead on energy with the Shinotic. But they actually come in with Corviknight. That doesn't really matter too much because Astonish is dealing decent damage. Moonblast is resisted, but that puts them into range where 2 Volt Switches will get the farm down. We also force a CMP tie, meaning they're not going to reach another charge route as they did throw straight away. I'm now going to look to swap out straight away into my Shadow Beware. The opponent doesn't throw straight away, but they're going to come in with a Tinkaton. Now, the opponent is just going to go for a Bulldoze, which we're able to tank. However, these Fairy Winds are starting to add up here, and you can see Beware, honestly, just not tanking the damage very well at all. They shield the first move, which is unfortunate, as of course, Superpower is going to debuff my attack and my defense, but we have the Bulldoze loaded. Now, Ampharos, I believe, does have some residual energy, but will they reach back-to-back charge moves? If they're at back-to-back right now, unfortunately, we will be losing this game, but no, we're able to win CMP with the Shadow Heliolisk, and of course, Bulldoze, super effective damage. It will eventually connect up against the Ampharos, and when it does, it gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up there into next battle. I'm going to see Shadow Camerupt in the lead. That is quite a tricky core breaker for me. However, they're actually on Ember rather than Incinerate, which does make this a lot more comfortable because the opponent is not going to be able to fully fast move farm me down. And actually, even my Volt Switches are kind of adding up here, despite the fact that they are a ground-type Pokemon. Either way, I'm going to take the shield advantage, going to come in with the Shadow Beware, and I'm just going to shield here. The opponent is going to go for a Scorching Sands this time around. That's fine with me. I'm going to look to overfarm just a little bit here, and then fire off the Superpower. Superpower, gonna get the KO. They're now gonna come in with a Shadow Pidgeot, which unfortunately does just completely annihilate my backline. However, do we still have any play at all? I'm actually going to choose not to bother throwing any energy. Instead, coming in, if we live one gust, we might be able to win this game, but nope, unfortunately, we're not able to tank that. The opponent gets the gust farm down, and actually, if I went for back-to-back superpowers, they would have shielded the first, which means the second one wouldn't have done enough damage to KO, and we would have lost anyways. But into the next battle, we are going to see a Shadow Quagsire in the lead, or maybe a regular Quagsire, actually, I can't remember. Either way, we're going to be safe swapping into Beware. Now, typically, I did swap into Shinotic, but of course Shinotic does have a dominant matchup into Quagsire, so you do typically want to swap into the sort of least dominant Pokemon into their lead because you want to save that Pokemon for later in the game. Now here, Corviknight, I don't believe this is going to be a payback, so it's just the Air Cutter, which I'm able to tank. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Tinkaton, but honestly, this isn't that bad for me. The opponent not going to throw on the best timing here. We do sneak a full Astonish through. They end up baiting with a Bulldoze and dropping my defense. However, it doesn't really matter, as Moonblast still does big damage. The opponent, again, not throwing on perfect timing, which means I can shield, and even if they bait once again with another Bulldoze, we still end up getting the full farm down. The Quagsire does have some energy, however, this is not going to be a Stone Edge, it's just an Aqua Tail, which means I can now farm up to back-to-back Seed Bombs. The first one should be grabbing the final shield, and Seed Bomb number 2, it's double super effective damage. It will easily get the one-shot up against the Quagsire, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there, into next battle, we're going to see a Kanto Marowak in the lead. Now, this Pokemon seems to be making a huge resurgence in the Go Battle League right now, and it makes a lot of sense. Of course, it did get nerfed this season, with Mud Slap dealing less damage, but it's not exactly unusable, and I think people have now realized that actually people are just disrespecting the ground typing in the Go Battle League right now, and so actually it does have quite a lot of play, despite the fact that it is not quite as strong as it used to be. Now here, unfortunately, I'm going to have to double shield in this matchup, as the opponent has so much energy. We're going to swap out straight away, and the opponent's final Pokemon is Morpeko. Now, unfortunately, Astonish is going to be resisted damage here, but they're forced to go for Psychic Fangs. Psychic Fangs not going to deal much damage. It does drop my defense. However, if they don't go for an Aura Wheel the next time around, I might still just barely live that. So if I'm able to bank a Charge Move and then swap back into Heliolisk, honestly, we might still have some play. You see my switch clock is coming up, and we're able to swap out, but I end up over-tapping, and that is super frustrating there. You can see I'm trying to click on the Bulldoze immediately, but because we end up throwing on CMP, we lose CMP, we take big damage from the Psychic Fangs. If we were able to throw immediately there, and the opponent, if they try and commit to a full farm down, we might have been able to win that game there if we got a Bulldoze debuff. As you can see, Seed Bomb does connect, it does decent damage there, potentially could have got the KO after throwing a Bulldoze first, but unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, and we end up losing that game. But GG's up on there, into next battle, we're going to see a Shadow Alolan Ninetales in the lead. Not the best matchup for me, and they will outpace me quite comfortably as well, but I'm going to go for a Bulldoze bait here. Bulldoze going to be shielded by the opponent, and this one, honestly, I'd probably just let this go through. I don't really think I have play here. I'd have to double shield if I want to maintain alignment, and even then, I still wouldn't be in the best position. So now, we're going to come in with Beware, and we are going to go for a superpower here, but honestly, tanking a Weather Ball did big damage. We're now going to swap out into Shinotic, and the opponent not going to swap out here. Of course, they can now go and full send a Shadow Ball. We've still got 2 shields, so we might as well start shielding. I'm now looking to overfarm massively in this matchup, and then firing off the Seed Bomb. Seed Bomb gonna be no shielded, but their final Pokemon is going to be their own Grass Astonish user in the form of a Moongus. We've only got resisted charge moves, but Moonblast does big damage, and it also drops their attack stat, which is really nice for me because the opponent might actually be able to go for a full Astonish farm down here, whereas now I'm going to swap out. The opponent forced to throw some energy as I am double resisting the Astonish damage, and as a result, Foul Play gets the KO, but we Astonish farm then down with Shinotic, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's over there, into the next battle, we're going to see Morpeko in the lead. So this is going to be a slightly okay-ish matchup for me. I should be able to live an Aura Wheel, or if they go for Psychic Fangs, I can definitely live that. You see, that does so much damage though. So now, I'm going to go for the Bulldoze. If they end up shielding here, I will just swap out straight away. The opponent is going to shield, so we swap into Beware, and unfortunately, they're now boosted. I'm going to have to shield on a Psychic Fangs, sorry. A Psychic Fangs would pretty much get the one-shot. The opponent now going to swap out into Quagsire, and here I make a pretty big mistake. Now I'm already debuffed here, so I don't want to go and debuff myself again with a superpower, but we've got Shinotic in the back. There is no reason for me to shield here. I was basically just hoping to force some of their energy because I didn't want to be hit with a Stone Edge up against my Shinotic, but I've used my shield now anyway, so kind of just a waste of time. And you're going to see they're going to have a Jellicent in the back, and as well, if I don't try and catch a move, if I just stay in there, I could probably win this game quite comfortably, whereas now, unfortunately, the opponent has a lot of energy. You can see Shadow Ball does not get the KO there, but they're at back-to-back. So whilst, yes, I've just reached back-to-back Seed Bombs, it's a CMP tie, and whilst we win CMP, the opponent has that shield, so they go for Shadow Ball number 2. They get the KO, so really poor play on my end, but GG's to that opponent. Into the next battle, another Shadow Fortress in the lead. So once again, I'm happy to stay in this matchup, shield the first Sand Tomb, and then look to try and catch the next one onto Shinotic. We're just going to bank a ton of energy here. We farm up to a Bulldoze and a Parabolic Charge, and then we swap out and catch the move. The opponent going to choose to stay in with the Fortress, but the opponent, big mistake as they get fully farmed down. And they come in with a Galarian Corsola. So that's fine with me. The opponent then going to look to try and make a catch here, catching a Moonblast onto Wigglytuff where that does huge damage. I honestly don't understand why they didn't just come in with the Wigglytuff, because of course Astonish would have been double resisted, whereas instead they just chose to take big damage from those Astonishes on their Corsola before swapping out. So yeah, really strange play on the opponent's end, but it's now going to be game over as Bulldoze gets the KO. I'm going to swap out straight away, but we're going to completely wall this Pokemon, as of course Ghost is going to be double resisted. Rock from the Power Gem also single resisted by the fighting typing. I'm able to farm up to the payback. It's super effective. It gets the one shot, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's about that. Why can't I say GG's to opponent there? Into the next battle, we are going to see Walrein in the lead. Now, again, unfortunately, they are going to outpace me here in this matchup. We're going to shield the Icicle Spear. I'm now going to look to overfarm, and I might as well go for a Parabolic Charge as the opponent. Well, if they do end up shielding here, that's fine. I boost up my defense. I'm going to commit to a farm down anyways, and the fact they're staying in with Walrein implies they probably have a second Pokemon also weak to the Heliolisk, and they have exactly that. This time around, I might as well go for Bulldoze, as I'm definitely going to grab a shield, and I'm able to swap out, debuff their defense, and catch a Hydro Cannon onto my Shinotic. Their final Pokemon is going to be a third Pokemon weak to electric typing in the form of a Shadow Charizard. They go for the Air Cutter. Air Cutter gets the KO. Honestly, I probably could come in with the Heliolisk and go for a Bulldoze, but we're going to come in with Beware, basically just force some of their energy. I don't think an Air Cutter will quite KO. So the opponent instead commits to a Blast Burn, but that allows a full farm down. We come out with the Parabolic Charge loaded. Honestly, quite fortunate gameplay on my end there for the end game. As we come out with the move loaded, we get the KO up against the Feraligatr, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's to opponent there. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Moltres in the lead. The opponent's going to be safe swapping into Diggersby, and I can respond straight away with the Shadow Beware. Now, honestly, this is probably the most annoying matchup here, because Scorching Sands, that puts me into range where if I farm up to back-to-back superpowers, they're just going to farm me down here, and that is so annoying because we end up going down. We don't get off the second charge move. They are still incredibly healthy, and I don't have any fast move pressure now, as I've got Heliolisk and Astonish. Oh, sorry, Heliolisk and the Shinotic on Astonish, both having double resisted fast move pressure. Now, they do swap out into Tinkaton. We're not in the best position whatsoever, but I'm going to shield here. They go for a Bulldoze. Bulldoze does not drop my defense there, which is quite nice, and actually, I can now raise it with a Parabolic Charge. We get the KO there. Could have gone for Bulldoze, which also would have hit for super effective damage. However, I might as well boost my defense. We can now go for the Bulldoze. We drop their defense in turn as well, but we're still not in a great position. They go for Scorching Sands. I'm going to look to swap out after banking a charge move. They swap back into Moltres, and if they commit to a farm down, we are going to reach a Moonblast. However, we don't have a Parabolic Charge loaded, which means the opponent ends up shielding there. I tried to throw the move. We didn't quite have it just yet, and as a result, Brave Bird gets the one shot. And unfortunately, I lose that game. But GG's to opponent there. Into the next battle, we're going to see Jellicent in the lead. So my entire team has pretty good play into this Pokemon. They're going to be swapping out into Quagsire, which is, honestly, this opponent just does not respect grass types whatsoever. We're going to come in with the Shinotic, which has a lot of play into both the Quagsire and the Jellicent so far. We're going to go for the Seed Bomb. Seed Bomb is going to be shielded. We throw it on CMP. And now I might as well shield here, as I can now outpace them to the next Seed Bomb. And Seed Bomb, of course, double super effective damage. I don't expect them to double shield here, so Seed Bomb will get the KO. They should come back in with the Jellicent, which is fine with me, as the opponent cannot commit to a full Hex farm down. They're forced to throw. They go for a Surf Bait there, but that's okay. Of course, from that range, it will get the KO anyways, but their final Pokemon is going to be Charjabug. We go for Bulldoze. Bulldoze going to drop the defense there and grab the shield, and now I swap into my Beware. This time, I do bank a Parabolic Charge before swapping out, which means I might as well just shield here, play it safe, as of course, at this point, I can now go and full send a Payback. Jellicent won't be able to fully farm me down, and even if they were able to do so, it wouldn't really matter. Payback gets the KO. We've got a parabolic charge loaded on the Heliolisk. All I need to do is remember which side the charge move is on. I remember correctly as it's on the left. I do sometimes make that mistake there, especially with Pokemon that I have literally just built, but we get the KO up against the Jellicent, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's on there into the next battle. I see Credilli in the lead. Now, they're on Bullet Seed, so actually not that bad of a matchup for my Shiinotic. If they're on Acid, that is double super effective into the Grass and Fairy typing. But, unfortunately, it doesn't really matter too much, as the opponent's now going to come in with a Talonflame and just completely shut down the Shiinotic. We are going to wait out our switch clock here just a little bit, come in with the Heliolisk, and I'm probably going to have to double shield and then fully farm them down, but I really don't mind doing that. Actually, no, never mind, they don't get to a second charge move. We have so much energy here. However, I kind of want to start grabbing shields. If I don't throw straight away, the opponent can eventually just swap out of this matchup, or maybe even grab a shield on my end, whereas now, because I've debuffed myself, they can definitely grab my shield, and their final Pokemon is going to be Morpeko, and I'm already debuffed here, which means, unfortunately, Psychic Fangs, super effective, gets the KO. That is certainly not ideal, but we do have a lot of energy. Actually, 100 energy to be specific. We go for Bulldoze, we grab the final shield, we can now go for another Bulldoze. Bulldoze gets the KO up against the Morpeko, and it's going to be very close, but we're able to throw on CMP. I go for Bulldoze here, but you're going to see Bulldoze is a mistake as it doesn't quite get the KO, and I actually looked into this Parabolic Charge, despite of course being resisted, will do more damage as it is stab damage, and Bulldoze is just such an awful charge move. It does like 6 more damage, which might have been the difference between winning and losing that game, so pretty unfortunate there, but honestly, I should have just gone for the Parabolic Charge anyways. But either way, into the next battle. GG's to that previous trainer, by the way. We are going to see the opponent's going to be safe swapping into Fight, and at this point, once again, we're going to reach back-to-back superpowers here, but we are getting incredibly low. Luckily, this time around, we do at least get to fire off the second superpower, but the opponent actually ends up throwing on CMP. That is quite nice for me, as they go for a Swift. But now, of course, we can come back in with the Heliolisk. I don't really want to tank I have to shield a Swift here, so I'm just going to fire off the Bulldoze. Bulldoze gets the KO. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Wigglytuff, as of course, they led with the Jellicent. It was a pretty obvious team read, and so we go for Parabolic Charge, but it doesn't really matter. We had 3 Pokemon that can deal with the Jellicent, so I'm just going to safely shield here. Of course, Icy Wind going to debuff my attack stat, but it doesn't really matter. Shiinotic in its shadow form can still get the KO with the Astonish damage and a Seed Bomb. Now, they end up baiting with the Surf. It doesn't really make a huge difference. I don't throw on CMP just in case we didn't quite get the KO with the Seed Bomb, as I had back-to-back loaded, but it does get the knockout. Seed Bomb, number 2, takes out the Wigglytuff as well, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's over there, into the next battle, we are going to see a Togekiss in the lead once again, and the opponent is going to choose to stay in this matchup. Of course, I'm going to shield as they can go for an Aura Sphere, and the opponent now going to swap out into the Kanto Marowak. So last time around, we did see the opponent, if they wanted to, they could double shield and fully farm down. This time, I'm actually going to make the first decision here as I shield here, and now we are going to look to throw a Seed Bomb on CMP. We already know that we can just barely tank a Rock Slide from this range, so we force a shield there. The opponent, of course, forced into the CMP tie, which we're able to tank, but they then swap out. Didn't realize their switch clock had already come up in time, which means they're able to catch a resisted Seed Bomb, waste all of that energy. We come back in with a Heliolisk, and we are going to reach back-to-back Bulldozers here, but Bulldoze not going to drop the defense there, which means the second Bulldoze, whilst it is going to get them very low, barely doesn't quite get the KO. Now, we're going to come in with Shiinotic, get the farm down, but their final Pokemon is Empoleon, and certainly with these IVs, I don't think we're living a Drill Peck here. Of course, the opponent at the Drill Peck, it gets the KO, and unfortunately, we do lose that game. But GG's on there, into the next battle. I don't know why I really struggle to say GG's to that opponent there. But into the next battle, we're going to see the opponent is leading with a Mightyena. I don't know if that was a CMP tie there, or if the opponent just didn't throw straight away. It looks like they didn't throw there. They're going to swap out a Snipe with the Gastrodon. I don't mind that because we've got a hard punish in the form of Shiinotic. Worst case scenario, they go for a body slam, doesn't really do much damage here, and then I might as well look to farm up to throw just on CMP here. Unfortunately, not quite at back-to-back Seed Bombs just yet, but Seed Bomb gets the KO. They come back in with the Mighty Enna, and I can no shield here. However, if they've got something like a Wigglytuff in the back, that would be really devastating, but luckily for me, it is not the Wigglytuff. Instead, it's going to be Azumarill, which, whilst yes, it does still completely wall our energy, they don't have quite as much fast move pressure, especially into Shiinotic, where Bubble is resisted. It's actually a very comfortable matchup. Now here, we're going to go for a Seed Bomb. Seed Bomb, unfortunately, even though we're a Shadow Pokemon here, and it's super effective, it doesn't really get them into range, or I can farm them down before they reach the next move, but the opponent gonna swap back into Mighty Enna, and they didn't quite have the Poison Fang loaded, which means now we can just commit to a full Astonish farm down. The opponent is going to throw some energy, doesn't really matter. We get the Astonish farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG to opponent into the next battle, and I believe the final battle of this video, we're going to be leading into a Shadow for Alligator. It's a great lead for me. The opponent's going to be safe swapping into Licky Licky, and so far everything is going to plan. The opponent goes for a Body Slam, don't mind that at all, still does decent damage, and unfortunately a second Body Slam will KO. However, speaking of KOing, Superpower easily gets the KO there. They come back in with a Tinkaton, and we can fire off another Superpower before they fully farm me down. Now, unfortunately, Shiinotic doesn't have the best matchup into Tinkaton whilst they are so far ahead on energy, so I'm actually going to come back in with the Heliolisk, as the opponent is now going to go for a Gigaton Hammer. Honestly, I thought they'd go for a Bulldoze there. I was going to try and catch the next one onto Shiinotic, but the opponent maybe just not really being that aware of typings, or maybe they just literally don't have Bulldoze. I don't really know so far, but either way, we're going for our own Bulldoze, and from this range, Bulldoze gonna get the KO. They come back in with Feraligatr, and unfortunately for them, the opponent is actually not going to reach 2 charge moves. I don't need to throw any energy here, as all I can do here, commit to a full Volt Switch farm down, taking out the Feraligatr, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.